All right, so we're going to talk about customer-focused design, stakeholders, market fit, and user validation. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but I just wrote this book. It's called Medical Device Fireside Chats. It's now available on Amazon. This book is basically me having a conversation with a startup entrepreneur on the medtech side and helping them figure out the questions that they need to ask themselves as they're going through this process of developing a new product. Nice. Or starting a new company, figuring out funding and all these types of things. So as I went through this and Joe was asking me to talk, I said, I want to kind of go through a few things that I realized as going through this book is that we all seem to forget. So we all forget that there's really no company without a customer. When you're working in a big organization, thousands of people, somebody tells you work on a project, you just work on the project and you go through the motions, but you don't know how or why that product's going to be sold, who wants to buy it. Hopefully the processes kind of address that stuff and user validation and KOL conversations in your sales force. But when you're a startup and you just got a couple guys working on the project, a few ladies going around and trying to figure out the right doctors to talk with, you really have no customer, no company without a customer. And then you have to in order to have a successful product, you have to solve a problem. A lot of people try to develop really cool gadgets, something that they thought was niche, but it doesn't really solve a problem that's meaningful to anybody else. So what that causes is a lot of consternation, a lot of lost funding, grants, wasted effort. And that's very critical to make sure that you actually have a problem to solve, which all of us know this, but we often tend to forget, especially when we're in big organizations and or we're starting off on something new and there are 500 other tasks to work on. And then obviously that product adoption will make or break your company. So if you're trying to go outside the bounds of what you really want to address and you're trying to make it a little bit more novel than it needs to be, you'll actually create some market adoption problems. And that could really cause some delays in you making revenue, possibly even tank the entire company. So as I'm going through what we need to kind of address in those questions, I think we always need to just be aware. We got to expect the unexpected. So every time you're going through a product, you're going to have this unpredictable path. You have a series of events that need to occur. You've got to go through inputs, outputs, verification, validation, work with your customers and try to get on the market. But every time you're going down that path, something major changes, right? That product, you come up with a new feature, a new evolution of that device. Hopefully it happens early, but sometimes it happens really late in the game. So you have to be looking for market feedback. And I think everybody here is aware that if you're not working with doctors and surgeons early on to try to understand whether or not your product's going to be utilized, it probably won't be, or you'll miss a step, or they'll say, well, this other company's doing it this way, and I really like what they're doing, but you're not doing it that way, so I probably won't use your product. So a lot of feedback on that side of things is going to occur. And if you're not looking for that feedback, you're going to fail. It may not be a major failure, but it's definitely going to set you back a few months, a couple $100,000, maybe more, depending on the type of product. And so those unexpected costs are going to keep piling up as you are not engaging with your actual customer. So you need to make sure you're doing that. And you have to be flexible to actually listen and adapt to what they're saying, because it's too easy to say like, yeah, it's just this one doctor. He doesn't really know what he's talking about. Or it's just a certain group of people and I'm still right. So you gotta be fast and flexible as you're listening to those folks and make sure they're making good progress forward with the device that you're actually developing. Anybody have any good feedback on something that just major headaches that have caused problems in the past?
I'm sure Rick does.
I've got one fun story. When I was starting out in this, this is probably year 14, but when I was starting out in it, I would occasionally get that call, that call you dread saying, wow, I just saw your invoice. Why is it this? Or what are we doing about this? And also the call of, I thought we were here on the project. Why is it that we're over here? And I thought about that for a while and finally decided that for all of my clients, I go ahead and post at the very minimum, even if they don't ask for it, even if they don't want it, an Excel online sheet. And that means they have a link they can access from their phone, from their computer, any version, doesn't matter what it is, it's internet, so it's pretty universal. And the 3 simple columns. 1 is the date, 2 is the description of the things that were done, and then going across on the right, the number of hours, and then hours multiplied by, and that's on a job where that's not a job where they are paying by the hour and they're not paying with one single price. If it was one single price, it would be percentage of work done as opposed to what needed to be done, deliverables, those kind of points. But even on the hourly thing, I never got another one of those phone calls again because they were always aware. They had the ability to be aware every single day what was going on. And those are the kind of little innovations. They didn't have anything to do with being a better designer or anything like that. They just had to do with communicating with the people that were counting on me to help them through their problems.
Absolutely. That's a great example covering basically all those topics, right? I mean, your product is a service, so you've evolved that, listening to the feedback and addressed all unexpected costs. So that's a great example. I recently just had a challenge with a medical device that we took. We were getting ready to go to market getting ready to go to Capital Tooling, believing we were ready to go to market. And we did another event with KOLs, and fortunately, they said, wow, if it could only do this one more thing, it would be perfect. Well, that one more thing is not done by anything else we've ever seen or anything on the market. So it's actually a novel addition to the product. So we, had to take a step back, make those minor edits, and now we're moving forward to tooling. But, without taking that extra step and just double checking everything again, we would have never gotten that additional insight or aha moment from the client.
Justin, I think, also in here is inaccurate assumptions based off of the client thinking that they already understand their regulatory pathway. And then they will tell you X, Y, and Z about their product up front. Then they go off and they fundraise. You might not hear from them for a while. They'll talk to somebody like you or Rick. They make design modifications, and then they come back to you sometimes years later. And they're operating off the presumption that that their regulatory pathway is the same. And then they had that meeting like you're talking about with that KOL, and they added this whirligig that nobody else has. And now all of a sudden we're off in de novo land at best. And then they're looking at me like, you told me that this was going to be an 80-hour 510K, as opposed to a 200+ hour de novo. So
yes. And de novo is starting to become more of a common term now with all the changes that are occurring with these products.
And then I also have people give me inaccurate or incomplete descriptions of their product. And then as we're going through their regulatory pathway analysis, oh, I didn't tell you it has Bluetooth. Oh, I didn't tell you it has, I'm like, no, you didn't mention it. Nor was it in the 20 documents you uploaded. So
nice.
Everything has Bluetooth now.
Similar from an IP perspective, the sort of classic is, well, we haven't seen it on the market. And so just kind of assuming that just because it's not on the market, there's no IP covering it. But then very much just like Michelle said, if they think about it, maybe they do an FTO, a freedom to operate search early, they get the results. And then like you said, Justin, oh, let's add this feature because it seems like no one else has it. And forget to the fact that you would have to redo the FTO, or like Michelle said, giving incomplete sort of documentation of what's included in the product and only focusing on one feature, whereas there's a bunch of other features that could equally be sort of IP red flags and big risk.
And I get it because everybody thinks they can do their own packaging and they read a standard and don't understand what's there. And don't do it.
I get the challenge that actually I've literally just ended a contract with a client because I'm just exhausted after 3 years, where you come in and you tell them exactly how to do the design control correctly. They run off, they design the project, they come to you and they say, hey, I have commercial product at IQ, OQ, PQ. And I'm like, well, great, you have no design control documents. So now it costs 3 times the amount because you have to remediate it, and you're remediating it, you're re-engineering it basically, because you don't even have anything in place. So then when they went to there's 2 designs, I said, let's do this right. And then because it was another remediation effort and they're frustrated with me, and I'm like, look, if you'd done it right the first time, you wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. But they don't listen. They think they can go out, build that product, come to you and say, here's my product, now get me out the door for commercialization.
Yep.
And I'm not a magician. I play one on TV. I'm just not one in real life.
Yeah, it's amazing how people think like, I feel like I'm done, therefore a 510K is possible.
Yep.
No, you still have like, depending on the product, it could be another 8 or 9 months worth of testing.
I'm on the inverse. They come to me and say, I have an approved 510K, let's ship product. And I'm like, you have no design control. The effort to put the design control is a lot more sometimes than the 510K.
Yep.
Didn't think you'd get that much feedback on this slide, did you?
No, actually, I planned for feedback, so I'm good. That's awesome. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is usability. Obviously, when we're working with trying to make sure we're engaging with stakeholders early, there's a lot of things that we need to go through. So or just early stakeholder engagement and listening to that feedback, we have to be aware that every group is different, right? So we can't just focus on the clinician and ignore the scrub nurse or the OR tech, maybe somebody that's servicing the product in the background. So it's very easy to get one-sided clinical information from just the clinician, and we ignore everything else, and we have major conflicts in how the product is even just unpackaged in the OR. So very simple things, having those communications with different groups. And, in this case, from a usability perspective, you can do an early stage formative that's maybe not even documented that well, that's still going to be beneficial. But documenting it is obviously going to be pushing you along that path a little bit better. And you got to listen to that feedback. On the validation side, as you're getting feedback from clients and you're in essence failing your usability questions from a formative or worst case summative perspective, which then just becomes another formative, you've got to listen to that feedback and refine your approach. Oftentimes, a lot of people will just try to change the labeling just a little bit, add another color, and try to figure out if that's going to be their path forward. But the standards pretty clearly make us push in the other direction, right? We're going to change design first, we're going to add in protective measures, and then we're going to affix labeling last. So let's make sure we're hearing what they're saying and seeing if we can design it out before we actually take a step further that's actually going to cause additional delays by failing a next second or third time. And then kind of what I mentioned before, you need to be aware of just yourself, right? And possibly your sales force or the founder of the company, the overconfidence that's there. You're right. And therefore the other people telling you that you're wrong are just not correct, and you can discount it. It's not hard to come up with reasons why the other person doesn't understand your perspective. But be open to listen and hear those things. Consider the changes. And maybe you can isolate that person down to a niche issue, but in many cases you can see their perspective and consider changes that would actually benefit and create additional value to your product. I'm always finding stories where people think that they're right, and I've done it before as well. But we have to be open to listen.
Yeah, Justin, it's there are no ugly babies in this world, right? So especially when you've invented a product, you feel that you've got the best feel of it. And yeah, going to your previous slide, it's a combination of things that I found with clients is that approach where they're not open to the feedback or they don't seek it out because they think they understand their product better than everybody else. So yeah.
Another thing I've learned a lesson, and it's kind of more of a lesson going forward, is as the quality system person, I don't usually get invested in who's on the board, but one of the companies I have, all their board members are non-medical device people. So they're like, my device is simple. Why is it taking so long to do the paperwork? I'm like, well, your 510K may be simple, but the design controls are still the same. It doesn't matter whether you're simple, complex, or what. As a class 2 device, you still have the same minimum requirement design documents and as a baseline. And so you've got a board team that doesn't understand med device. And so when you're saying you've got to produce this documents, they're like, they don't understand. And so then they're applying pressure on your CEO. So going forward, I'm going to ask who's on the board and if they're on med device. I didn't care before, but now it's become kind of a factor in what I'm doing.
To that point, Nellie, you remember Theranos?
Yes.
Their board was a train wreck. Not only did they not have any medical device people, they just had like DOD people. Henry Kissinger, like it made no sense. Nobody had any context.
Yep.
Just riding this train that she was from Stanford and this was so novel, and obviously the FDA was going to go for it.
Yeah, no,
but it was their board too that was driving and partly accountable for all that debacle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, this breakup with this last client, I've literally sat down and I've gone, wow, you know, there were so many red flags. If I had just maybe created a list of red flags. I mean, we have red flags from another client where if we had done some research, we actually now Google at the customer to see if they have lawsuits. Because there was another client I had who threatened to sue us because of a decision that was made by their senior management, but because I was the one signing people up for their box, their dollars got amount. And so now it's like, okay, we sign a new client. We do a Google search. Are they somebody who's commonly known for suing people? Because that's one of the things when we looked at this person, he had lawsuits with his parents, with his partners, with everything,
Nice.
all public knowledge. So it's like, okay, now that's a good lesson. The next lesson is if I bring a new client on, I want to know who the board members are. I want to be introduced. I want to know that because that impacts my ability to be successful and have the CEO understand what's going on.
What happened with your lawsuit?
Oh, it got dropped because after a while he got bored with it and he had some bigger fish to fry. And so he's a bully who threatens it and never carries it out for the smaller stuff. But he had me and a friend of mine in tears over something. And so it's like, okay, lesson learned there. But like, I'm telling you, this is my lesson learned week again. And it's hurtful, but yet it's beneficial if you sit down and actually digest it.
Yeah,
One thing about, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick. I was gonna say, I agree with the red flags, making sure you know what they are. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started developing a list of red flags and I just pay attention to them religiously. I'll forget what most of them are, so I always have to go back to the list. But one of the things about being in business for yourself is if you don't walk in with a fairly large ego, you can't even do it. So the cure for that is, one of the cures for that is groups like this, where you're looking at people and think, well, I think I know pretty much about this and this and this and this. So then Nelly starts saying the very first thing, comes out of your mouth about these things. And I'm going, oh, I really wasn't thinking about that. And it's caused me to get a disproportionate number of recommendations from regulatory people, because when you listen to them, they kind of figure that out. But everybody here is an expert on something, and I'm sitting there just listening. And humility isn't thinking you're an idiot. Humility is realizing that there's so many other people that are really, really brilliant.
Actually, I look at it a different way. It's not humility. When you have a group of people who sharpen each other's knowledge and strengths and actually support each other, like I can tell you, I've been on the phone with Michelle a ton of times about this client and a couple of other people. And what it is, it's like, am I crazy? Am I going in the, am I overreacting? It's having somebody to bounce something off and calibrate your position. And so I think every Friday, I thank God for this group, because these people I actually talk to all the time. I may not work with them, but I talk to them. They've become part of the fabric of my success.
You make Joey happy. Hyben, you have something?
Okay. Yeah, I think everything you said is true, but it sounds so simple. Listen to feedback from key opinion leaders. But incorporating those feedback remarks in your product doesn't necessarily mean you get a more profitable product. So you have to be very careful what you do with your feedback. It's not that the feedback is always right. It might be right in their perspective, but not in how to get a profitable product to market.
I definitely agree. You can complicate it and add gold plating and other issues.
Yeah, but
I'm
also,
just saying you need to be open, right?
It's also very hard to get to the right amount of feedback people, because if you only, usually with startups, it's very hard to get to your target group. So it ends up you only speak with 5 to 10 people, and whatever they say gets so much weight in your development cycle that it sounds so simple. Listen to feedback, but I think it's one of the hardest things to do in development.
I agree. And actually, along the lines of what you were saying there, as far as the number of folks that people generally talk with, I mean, I think the FDA pushes us to, keep it as low as possible. We're going to follow their rules. 6 to 7 people for a formative, maybe 8, and then we're going to do 15 for a summative, and we're going to try to get, push it to the limits of least burdensome approach. But the larger the company, the more people they're going to ask. And what we're finding now is a lot of the startups, they view these people as potential customers. So while they're getting feedback, they're not just discarding them, they're keeping them in their email chains. They're giving them progress updates, almost like they're invested in the company, but they're just a user participant. And it ends up being almost like marketing your product early, but you have a reason to stay in touch. So you're not. So it's a very interesting kind of line that I see a lot of people pushing down. I've met one company that had early stage, like already had 75 users that had touched the product. And they were using that also to communicate with investors, how they've got a large group and a large following. So it's very interesting. Again, if you listen to all of them, you'll never get your product on the market.
Yeah, I think I was just going to add to the conversation here a little bit that, you know, having a singular focus on what unmet need that you meet in the marketplace and taking this feedback that you're getting. And I have a number of folks that also need to differentiate between what their first gen product looks like compared to their second generation product. So well, how are you going to launch that product? What are the features and benefits that you want to go to market with your Gen 1? And do you need all the bells and whistles in that version versus creating the Gen 2? A lot of folks will get that regulatory approval, get that first limited market release, or at least that initial approval, and then they could do a 510K approach to follow that on with their second generation device. So keeping that singular focus about what that unmet need are, what the absolute features and benefits that you need, I think is a key point to you know, the conversation here.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is when I'm helping a client kind of vet out in the beginning concept phase, it's like, you don't have to boil the ocean. So I create a OneNote that I share with them and I say, here's our goals. And then here's the parking lot. What's critical for first launch? Because they get this vision of, I'm going to launch once and that's it. So I've got to get it right. And it's like, no. You want to launch. What do you want to get right the first time? Not right, but you know what I mean? What do you want to target the first time? And then, hey, you're going to want to improve. Let's put the parking lot here, because then once you have a parking lot, everybody gets to go, is this here or the parking lot? Is this here for the parking lot? And then now you have a conversation for version 2. Or, you know, if you're making a change, it's like, okay, is there anything in the parking lot we want to pull in now? Because we've got to update this other item. So that's what I have found is helpful.
Yeah, I see that happen quite a bit as well. I mean, it's not uncommon to have the first call and be talking about version 2, version 3, the next platform. It's like, yeah, let's work on one product first, but there's plenty we can help you with.
Yeah, that's a new thing that I've started, and I actually have formalized it. It was very informal, but it's something new in my suitcase.
Well, there we go. All right, so kind of along the same lines, trying to figure out, are we on the right track? And we've been talking about making sure we have a problem to solve.
You're dating
And,
yourself.
I'm gating.
You're dating yourself with your Danger Will Robinson, which
I know,
completely
but
relate to.
but I think, Joe, you like some of these old things, so I threw it in there for you.
I appreciate that.
As we're going through these problems and trying to figure out what our message is, I think Barry just pointed this out. Let's make sure we really understand what we're working on and refine that communication about the product. Staying focused on that singular mission is really going to help you stay focused and give you a mission for that product. But then the next piece is really, where are you going on a market perspective? I mean, there are so many different things you can talk through. Say you're doing a product on oncology. Well, now you're talking about 20 different applications and different organs, etc. You really need to pick something and stay focused and really understand where you're going and where it's going to be the most useful at the beginning, and then kind of map out that process for the future, just like we were talking about V1, V2, V3. And you're also going to find there's a lot of stuff that's outside of your reach, right? So don't think you're taking on intuitive surgical on day one, because you're not. That's not going to be the way you displace the entire world. So we need to make sure that we really understand what the market we're trying to capture is, what's out of our reach, and understanding those details. And then, you know, this is something when it comes to like all the new stuff, AI and everything else that's coming out. You know, our industry is cautious. You know, med tech is, you know, we claim to be really pushing the limits of technology, but we're laggards. I mean, we're not doing what Apple's doing. We're not doing what Amazon's doing. We're 5-10 years behind most of the time. And so with that, if you're trying to make major waves, you're not likely going to be successful out the gate. You're going to be the first one there. You're going to prove the path for everybody else, and then they're going to be successful. So just be aware the industry is cautious. I don't think everybody notices that all the time. All right, so basically, are we listening yet? We need to be listening to everybody else that's talking around us as we're developing our product and making sure they're actually heading down the right path. Are they actually willing to use the product? In some cases, you can ask questions that kind of guide them to get your usability or your design validation approved, but they're not giving you buying signals. So I think when you're going through this process, you should be looking for buying signals as well. Like, I can't believe this. This is awesome. I want to use this instead of these 4 products. If you're not driving that kind of communication in your user validations, you're gonna have an adoption issue. Now, you may not want to document it in that way with your records, but you want to be looking for those kind of signals. And then, and your key opinion leaders, are you leveraging their expertise? What's different about their influence than others? Are they writing publications? Are they speaking in front of people? It's not uncommon for you to use 5 or 10 people in a usability study and then just never talk to them ever again. And so why would you do that if you just found somebody that has some interest, they were able to digest your product, they think your product might actually be useful, and then you don't reach out later to kind of foster that relationship, improve that influence that they have on the market. I think a lot of the big players do it right, but they also do it wrong as well because they wrap up their key opinion leaders and they ignore everybody else. So it's a very tricky exercise no matter how you're doing it. But if you're talking to a clinician, they should be part of your relationship moving forward, and you should nurture that and continue to figure out how to improve your overall market strategy and your commercialization strategy moving forward.
How do you get a hold of KOLs?
I think it's there are multiple ways to do it. Obviously, if you have a key technology that you're researching, you're going to find several people that are kind of in that zone. You reach out to them individually, try to get them on board. But a lot of times what I'm doing from a usability perspective is we're simply engaging with any kind of clinician, may not even be a KOL. We're bringing them on board to do a study. And then you find out, like, hey, they actually are relevant in the area. They have a pretty good stature. The reason that they're doing these things is because they like to be innovative. And, you may not consider them your primary KOL, but you can find them along many paths.
Some of those KOLs too are us. That I know of is a physician I just published a paper with a year ago who's developing a technology, and it's in competition with something that we have at Boston Scientific. So I'm not reaching out to him about the technology, but I'm already watching missteps he's making from a reimbursement standpoint. And something I was going to say too on this, every one of us on this call has said at some point that people should be reaching out to us early.
Yeah.
It's almost like you got to reach out to everyone early. There's none of us that are like, yeah, you don't need me for another 5 years. Every one of us have said, you need us at T = 0. And Justin, and this also for Andrea, an interesting thing, a company that I know really well has in their patent that they don't do X. And I have to be intentionally vague on this, but X is a verb. And what they're saying they do not do would put them into an entirely different reimbursement category. So in their patent, they say, we do not do X. Well, fast forward 6-7 years, and in their reimbursement guide, they say that they do X, because they've realized at some point they've spoken to somebody in health economics and they said, well, how do we get into this reimbursement category? And whoever the consultant is, or their health economics and market access person, said, well, you have to do X. And they went, oh, shoot, in our patent, we say that we don't do X. So 5 years ago in their patent, they had to say something that now they disagree with. And the only reason why they're disagreeing with it is for reimbursement reasons. And so on that key opinion leader thing, Joe, how do you get these KOLs? Well, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of them should be doctors, and the other 15 should be us on this call that are saying, hey, we want to differentiate ourselves from the group. So is it okay in our patent if we say that we don't do X? And Nick Anderson raises his hand and says, bad idea. because if you're just this device, you're only going to get reimbursed $9,000. If you do X, you're going to get reimbursed $21,000. And they go, oh, good thing we talked to you, because we were just about to say in our patent that we don't do something that later we're going to want to be able to say that we do for reimbursement reasons.
You said do.
I said do. I knew you'd call me out on that.
Well, usually patent attorneys never want to put that in their patent unless they need to. So they are likely doing that because they need to get around prior art to get their own patent, right? So there's probably out there that says that they do that in that area, right? Or whatever. And so in order for them to get a patent, they have to say, oh, we do it in everything but that. Okay, and the patent office says yes. But then that's exactly the opposite a lot of times that they want to do with regulatory or reimbursement, because regulatory is the opposite. Like, oh no, our device is actually kind of like that, so that it's not a de novo. In the patent world, oh, it's not like that at all. And so it's always a discrepancy like that. But that's a red flag, because usually they just stay silent, right? And if they say we do it in this area, but to say we do not do it this way or for that purpose, that there is a reason behind it, a patent reason behind it.
It's good. Yeah, and I agree. There are key opinion leaders in so many different areas. I have been focused specifically on clinicians here, but you're right. So many other players in the world related to our product development. So thank you. Well, I don't know if there's anything else we want to talk through. I have a couple other slides I want to show you guys as well, but not 100% on topic. So anything else you guys want to cover before I just show you a few other slides?
Go ahead and share. We've been talking the whole way.
All right. So, well, this is just some folks that I've worked with in the past, in case anybody cared. Some big players in there, some little players. Always like to try to show what we can do. I do publicize some stuff in some magazines periodically, so there's some stuff out there if you ever heard about these guys. I did write the book, which I think is useful to potentially a lot of your clients, right? So if there's a value add there, just feel free to reach out to me.
How many pages is it? And define bestseller.
I sold it on Amazon, as you're required to get the bestseller stamp. So we did that. We're already a bestseller. It's 209 pages, I believe. And so one of the things I wanted to do is, and for the personal brand and everything else that I'm doing, is I'm trying to collect as much video detail as possible. So what I'm offering to pretty much anybody here is, if you have any interest in giving me a video testimonial to say, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about. I think he knows what's going on in the med tech space. I've known him forever. Anything along those lines. If you want to scan this, it'll give you a little screenshot that says, here's what happened. You gave your video testimonial, and I'll send you a free book.
And all you have to say is, we know this guy and he kind of knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's it.
I think your requirement is very low.
I'm underselling it, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I have a question. How did you get into writing the book? Because whenever I sit down to even think about it, I get completely distracted and go off in different tangents. What was your process of sitting down to put it down on paper?
So basically, I think it was out of frustration initially, having the same conversation over and over and over with different clients and startup companies that weren't funded, didn't have a good idea, couldn't get off the ground. And I'm like, why are these people even trying to do this? So how do I stop them early? Or have them change their idea to be more effective. And so that's kind of the initial impetus. And then I started drafting some ideas. And then as you get into writing a book, your entire world changes, and what you're doing and what you're writing, it changes significantly. So I hired a publishing company. They were working with me specifically on making sure that the message was solid for everybody, and not just like people that really understood med device, which is unbelievably difficult to do. But I like to kind of dumb things down. So I'm hoping that it's readable by most. And just a long process. You fight through it over and over again. It's amazing how many times you edit it.
How long did it take you to write it?
I would say if you look at actual time, it took about a year, but real calendar time, it took me 3 years to write the book. Because you get bored and you put it down.
Hi. I'm curious about the book as well. So I just scanned the QR code and it's asking to leave the review before we receive the book. So I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, no, that's what I want. I want a review of just this conversation, right? So like,
Oh,
hey,
okay. Okay.
hey, I watched them on MDG and that was great. It was a good conversation, that kind of stuff, right? So
Oh,
anything,
it was a good, I haven't read the book yet, so.
yeah, no, just give me
Oh,
something
I
on
see.
our
You thought it was
conversation
a
today.
review of the book you've not yet read.
Right.
No.
I see.
Yeah.
No, it's just
Any
a
kind of-
validation. He's just asking for a validation of him and that you know him and that he's a competent guy. And you look forward to reading it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The other question that I have also is about the book. Was it self-published through Amazon?
Well, I used a company called Two Penny Publishing, so they did all the processes through Amazon. Yeah, so it's
Oh,
it's
okay.
officially done by a publishing company.
Oh, okay. The reason why I asked that question is because say the book becomes more popular than it already is, then there's like the IP issue where things like that. That's why I was curious.
What's the IP issue?
Well, if you self-publish through Amazon, and I think Michelle was asking more about, publishing because she was interested in writing. If you self-publish through Amazon, then you have all your rights for the book. But if you use a publishing company, then you get whatever you agree
Oh, I
upon.
see. I see. Okay.
Yeah, so there's definitely pros and cons. And if you need a publishing company that gives you pretty open rights, I can always give you a recommendation.
Thank you.
Nellie has volunteered to lead next week's conversation, and
Nice.
it is going to be we went down this path a little bit, and I'd encourage you to reach her this week if you'd like to contribute in some way. As a consultant, what are red flags for you? Like, once you hear this, you know that this client is going to take you in a direction that you might want to cut bait earlier versus later. Have I captured the essence of that, Nellie?
Yeah, I really wanted to just because you have the experts here, getting everybody to share what you think your red flags are and come up with kind of a checklist and an early warning system so you don't get so far down the rabbit hole, you kind of go, why didn't I leave them sooner? Because one of the things I really learned kind of as self-aware is like 10 years ago, I thought I was a warrior and I could work with any client. And now in my more mature age, I'm like, I don't have to work with any client. There's enough out there that I can work with the ones that are enjoyable and are going to be beneficial to my company. And so just that flip has really made me look at my relationships. And I now every January analyze every one of my clients, giving them a score of, are they somebody I want to keep going forward? So just gathering all that information and centralizing it so everybody has something for themselves.
And I'm right now typing my contribution for next week. So you can do that over Slack as well.
Also validating everybody's self-worth, because it's so easy to your point, Justin, if you don't have a big enough personality to go in the room and you're sitting there arguing with people and you're the expert, you've talked with it, you validated it. It's like, how do you just stop the conversation of here's what you need to do? You're making a choice. I don't need to have the conversation anymore. That's another red flag. It's like, just empowering us to be more. I don't know what the right word is. I haven't come up with it yet, but that's kind of the intent of the conversation.
I'll send mine as soon as we.
Justin, are you planning on giving the book away for free to your clients that sign up? And then like as things come up, you can say, for your reading enjoyment, see chapter 3.
I somewhere along those lines, yeah. I expect something like that will occur.
What is the cost to you to give a free book to your client?
Virtually nothing. So
Okay.
like $5 or less.
Yeah, I think that's a good spend. Good idea, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Justin, for this week. For Joe Hage and Joe Hage Enterprises, this has been Joe Hage. Have a great week. I'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.